Welcome back to the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today we're going to check out the brand new for 2019 Gibson Les Paul Jr. Tribute DC bass. Wow, that's quite a mouthful. I'm just going to call it the DC bass. So before we dive into the review, let's learn a little bit about the history of this one, because I bet you can't piece it all together because it took me a few days to even realize it myself. Similar to as we were talking about on the new DC special video, in late 2018, Gibson released the DC Junior Tribute. It was a new model for the 2019 lineup that was based off of the late 50s Les Paul Jr. And that design was later revamped in 2019 for Gibson's new Modern series, with the DC Junior Tribute and the DC Special Tribute. And most people, when they saw these things, they're like, oh, they just made a bass version of it. And that included myself. However, I was browsing Instagram one day, and to my surprise, Chicago Music Exchange said that they helped design this bass with Gibson. So that got me thinking, is there something that this bass is trying to be that I'm just not familiar with or not remembering? And then it hit me. This is a spiritual successor to this guitar, the EBO. Technically, this is an EB3, but it's basically the same thing, you just have more pickups. When a lot of people think of a Gibson bass, this one might come to mind because it's been produced for a long time. Now, if you want to learn a little bit more about the history of the Gibson electric bass, definitely check out the full review and demo of this one, but here's what you need to know for this video. This was not the original design of the EBO. That looked like this. Huh. The double cut shape, eh? From 1959 to 1961, that's what the original EBO looked like. It had this really weird, unnecessary pickguard on it, and your controls were all the way at the bottom, but it featured the same shape that the DC Junior Tribute was based off of, the Doublecut Junior and Special. Those one featured a mahogany neck and body with a pickup that was placed right against the neck for those nice deep bassy tones. But now you have this. It's not necessarily a tried and true reissue, but it does have some historical significance to it. They weren't just necessarily plopping this over to the bass design. Some of the things they changed for this instrument, they moved the pickup away from the neck to the middle to kind of make it a little less muddy, I would guess. I think it would have been kind of cool looking had they put it up there as well. But I called it a spiritual successor because there's other things that they changed, and now I kind of see where CME might have stepped in here. Take a look at this bass's headstock. If you're familiar with Gibson bass history, you might think, that kind of looks like an L9S, better known as the Ripper. It also might look like a Les Paul signature bass, and that's something else that's interesting. It is officially a Les Paul model, so it is very similar to the Les Paul signature bass, better known as the Jack Cassidy model, as being called a Les Paul but looking kind of goofy. But the headstock, the tuners, all of that, this screams like 70s era despite being based off of something from the late 50s, early 60s. And for that reason, especially since it has a maple neck, I wish so hard that they would have put a volute at the back of the headstock. Whenever I look at this bass, I just go, yep, needs a volute. My mind almost just fills one in because it almost just seems natural on this bass instrument. So that's pretty much everything you need to know about the history of these. It is a tribute to the original EBO, and it kind of has some other 70s bass features built into it. But now let's jump into the actual review. What were my first impressions of this bass? I walked into Sweetwater not knowing which 2019s I was going to buy that day, and there was one of these things sitting as a demo model right as I walked into the store. And I thought, wow, those are tiny. It's way smaller than I expected. They are a reduced 30.5-inch scale. These are short scale basses, and I like that because I'm a guitar player. I don't play bass a lot, and whenever I have one of them full like 34-inch basses, it's like, oh, it's a little bit harder to play these things, so I love these tiny things. To give you an idea here, I mean, the bass is really only a couple inches taller, so it definitely is a very familiar size to guitar players. So as a guitarist, I love that, but you know, if you're used to Fender basses or something, you might not like this. But the next feature that really just blew my mind here is it's got a coil split on it. For being priced at $9.99, whereas the other special that's $9.99 doesn't have any type of fancy electronics, that was kind of cool to see that they put a little bit something extra in here. Because this reduced 30.5-inch scale, it's supposed to kind of help you get the lower bassier tones that Gibson basses are known for. And let's say you don't necessarily want that. You can split the coil of the pickup and kind of get slightly brighter tones. These definitely are not bright basses by any means on either setting, but you can definitely lay down some thick lines with this one. The next thing I noticed is this one's got some nice figuring to the wood. Not all of them have this. I cherry picked this example brand new. It's not quite as nice as my blue special here, but it was the best one in stock at that point in time. The neck itself feels really good. The sides of the fretboard and the neck were sanded even, unlike on my special, so I didn't have any issues with there. It's kind of a nice chunky neck profile. I don't want to say it's huge or anything, but it's super rounded, so it feels good in your hands. And the fret ends, they were nice and smooth, so no issues there. But now a few cons that I noticed right away is I thought the action was just a little bit high. Again, I'm not a bass player. Pretty much every bass I get is set up like this, so it just might be something I'm not quite familiar with. However, there's definitely room to take it down some, so that's just kind of a personal preference thing. The next thing I saw is the output jack plate is not actually screwed all the way down. If I press on it, you can kind of see there were a few more turns that needed to be done. Again, we're nitpicking here because, I want to give you the full experience of if you purchased one of these, what you'll get out of the box. The only other thing I will kind of complain about here is the pickup floats. Watch this. As I press it, it moves down. And why I view that as bad on a bass instrument is a lot of people like to anchor their thumbs on that. And depending on how you do that, you might accidentally press the pickup down, which will change the output for each individual string. It's a little bit far-fetched, but definitely possible. But we'll have to go throw this one on the workbench to see if maybe some stronger springs would help fight against that. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, starting with underneath this pickguard. This was a lot of fun for me to take off because I had no idea what was waiting under here. So you've got your neck tenon, T-E-N-O-N. A lot of people think I'm saying tendon or something else. It's called a tenon. I'll be honest, it looks a little rough, but I think it's doing the job, right? I'm not an expert when it comes to building the instruments. But here's what we've got as far as the pots. It looks like your standard push-pull type pot right here, and you have a Gibson branded one right there. The only thing I wish Gibson would do is make them push-push again. I think those ones break quicker, but I think they're easier to use than the push-pulls. That's just my personal preference anyways. But the routing job itself is very similar to the other DCs that we've looked at. But now this pickup, oh my goodness guys, this thing's freaky. So this cover comes off and then it all starts making sense. Look at this thing, that's quite interesting, right? So it's got the marking on the front of the pickup called Rhythm EB Bass, which stands for electric bass. If we're using what EB stands for historically anyways. But that's kind of a freaky pickup, and that's mainly just because I've never really seen a bass pickup torn apart like this. But you've got your pull pieces here, and you've got foam blocks, and then that just sits on a larger foam block there in order to help secure where it is. It's just secured by those two black screws. There are not actually any springs within it. So I don't think there is a way to fix how that pickup kind of floats and moves, except for by adding a firmer piece of foam. Something else that's kind of interesting here is you see how there's one hole here, but two over there? It looks like somebody accidentally drilled an extra hole in the wrong location at the factory. Not a big deal, but it's kind of funny seeing. Something that kind of scares me a little bit here is this is the way the pickup is mounted to the body, as I was talking about earlier. If you were to screw that all the way down, you would actually likely go through the back of the instrument. Now, I don't think anybody's going to do that, but somebody might, stupidly do it one day. And another thing is that screw is not very far into the wood. Here's the other screw, so you can kind of see it's really only got a little bit securing it there. So if this bass were to get hit on the side of the pickup, I could see this actually splintering the wood, and then your pickup would need remounted in a new drill hole. So I don't think that's ever really going to become an issue, but it's something that I could see potentially happening. The difference between the bass and the guitar versions is this one actually gets an intonatable kind of a wrap tailpiece. I mean, this is Gibson's 3-point bridge. It sits on these 3 posts so you can adjust your action that way. And then you use these screws like normal in order to adjust your intonation from there. The strings just kind of clip onto these ends. As far as the back of that goes, I do not see any identifying marks as to who made this for Gibson. So here we can see the mahogany body, maple neck, and this is a rosewood fretboard. Now, this is the first brand new Gibson I have bought in a long time where I thought, that fretboard does not need to be conditioned. So I'm actually happy with this one. This has got some great color in it. I love this red and black streaking. That's something that I wasn't necessarily expecting, but was a very happy surprise. I don't see any tooling marks or anything. The only very small thing, it looks like kind of a natural variation in the wood right there. Face of the headstock, again, you've got the Les Paul model silkscreen, Gibson silkscreen, blank truss rod cover with your truss rod in there. And here's what your nut looks like. And we have a 1.59 inch nut width, which increases to 2.05 inches at the 12th, a 0.87 inches at the 1st fret, and it stays fairly consistent at 0.91 at the 12th. My measuring tape stops a little bit short, but yeah, I would say that looks like it's the advertised 30.5 inches. Backside of the instrument, beautiful mahogany. This is a 3-piece body. There's kind of like a center one and then 2 wings. You've got the black plastic jack and the large strap buttons as we were talking about on the special. It's got the same thing going on where there's like a small gap right there just because of where they placed it. But it does balance the instrument pretty well, so no complaints there. I don't see any issues with the neck joint here, so everything looks good there. And you can see the beautiful maple neck here. It's got a little bit of figuring to it. I mean, the brown color kind of subdues it a little bit. But I chose brown because it was the only one that was figured. And now I'm kind of glad I did because it's kind of a 70s color and it matches the vibe of this instrument. The only other thing I want to talk about is you have Hipshot USA tuners on these. That's kind of cool. And as we saw in the 2019's Have Been Released video, this one does not have a crooked tuner. I've seen a lot of these where this tuner is crooked. I mean, does it really matter? No, but I mean, it's nice to know that this one is straight. You've got the Made in USA stamp and the old style serial number for 2019 made, 74th day of the year, first batch. Looks like 287th stamped that day. This particular example weighs 8 pounds, 3.5 ounces. Now let's get some tone samples out of this thing. It's just 2 simple settings. You've got coil split and regular. And keep in mind with the whole copyright stuff, I can't play famous bass riffs anymore, and I'm not really a bass player, so I'll just try to make some stuff up to help you guys. Full humbucker mode. Coil split. Now we'll roll the tone down on both of those. All in all, I think it has a pretty good tone for a bass. I mean, it's nice and fat. But if you need it to be a little bit brighter, you've got the coil split. other question is, does it neck dive? No, it's pretty balanced. I mean, you could feel it's like weighing on your shoulder right here, like it wants to go, but it's not actually going to go. So that's pretty good news. So now that we know how this instrument was built and how it sounds, what are my final opinions of this bass? I liked it. I think it's got enough of a vintage quirkiness to it that it will appeal to people like me. However, I mean, if you start doing comparison shopping, $1,000 will buy you a lot of bass. So I don't know if they're necessarily going to win the market over and make something crazily successful with these, but I'm definitely appreciative that they did. It's kind of got a 70s thing going on. It's kind of got a 50s and 60s thing. It's got that nice satin finish, which makes it very smooth and comfortable to play while on gigs. I mean, you've got a sweet maple neck. It really is a nice bass guitar. So if you're a guitar player that just needs a bass to occasionally, tinker around on, and you want something that's of good quality, I would suggest these based on that. So I hope you enjoyed this review of the new Les Paul DC bass. If you would be interested in being the next owner of this one, now that my review is done, it will be listed on Reverb for sale. You can check out that link in the description. If you decide to get one of these, they come in gig bags. They're nice, large, black with white interior, and this is the case candy you get, which includes the warranty manual, polishing cloth, owner's manual, truss rod adjustment tool, strap, inspected by checklist, baby photo, and the baggie that holds all of this contents. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.